There was a time when China was the center of the world. An empire of unrivaled power, wealth, and cultural brilliance, whose influence stretched across continents. This was the Tang Dynasty, China's golden age. It was an era of legendary poets, vast caravans carrying silk and spices, and a capital city that was the most magnificent on earth. But this golden age was forged in blood and betrayal, and its story includes one of the most ruthless and powerful women in history, China's only female emperor. This is the complete story of the dynasty that had it all, and how it all came crashing down. If you enjoy learning about history, consider subscribing so you don't miss our explorations of the world's most fascinating stories. To understand the brilliance of the Tang, you have to first understand the darkness that came before it. The once mighty Han Dynasty, a benchmark for Chinese power, had collapsed centuries earlier, plunging the land into a long period of division and warfare. Out of this chaos, a new power finally emerged, the Sui Dynasty. The Sui managed to do what seemed impossible: they reunified China. They laid the groundwork for future greatness, consolidating the empire and starting monumental construction projects, most famously the Grand Canal, an engineering marvel that would link the fertile south with the political north. But the ambition of the Sui emperors was their undoing. The second emperor, Yang, was a man of grand visions and even grander expenditures. His relentless drive to build, expand, and conquer came at a staggering cost. The Grand Canal demanded immense resources and the forced labor of millions. Ambitious wars and construction projects overstretched the empire's resources. A series of disastrous military campaigns against the Korean kingdom of Goguryeo bled the treasury dry and cost countless lives. The people groaned under the weight of heavy taxation and compulsory labor. The mandate of heaven, the divine right to rule, was slipping from the Sui's grasp. Discontent simmered, then boiled over into widespread revolts. The empire began to fracture once more. It was in this climate of chaos, with the Sui dynasty crumbling under its own ambition, that a new family saw their opportunity. A family that would not just inherit the Sui's unified empire, but would elevate it to heights never before seen. This was the Li family, the future founders of the Tang. As the Sui Empire disintegrated, a shrewd and experienced official named Li Yuan, the Duke of Tang, watched from his post as governor in the north. Li Yuan wasn't just any official, he was a first cousin to the failing Emperor Yang, giving him a unique combination of prestige and military experience. Sensing the inevitable collapse, he made his move. In 617, spurred on by his exceptionally talented and ambitious second son, Li Shimin, Li Yuan rose in rebellion. He wasn't alone, his militant daughter, Princess Pingyang, even raised and commanded her own army, a testament to the remarkable capabilities of the Li family. While Li Yuan was the face of the rebellion, its heart and soul was Li Shimin. He was a military genius, a master strategist who proved himself time and again on the battlefield. He was largely responsible for the key conquests that secured the Tang's future, including the capture of the strategic eastern capital, Luoyang. Within a few years, through a series of complex military operations, the Li family overcame their rivals. By 618, with the Sui emperor assassinated, Li Yuan proclaimed the founding of a new dynasty, the Tang, and took the throne as Emperor Gaozu. But the peace wasn't built to last. As the empire was consolidated, a new conflict arose, this time within the imperial family itself. A bitter rivalry brewed between the brilliant Li Shimin and his older brother, the crown prince, Li Jiancheng. As the eldest, Jiancheng was the heir. But Shimin's military triumphs and his powerful retinue of talented officials had made him a threat. The brothers plotted against each other, turning the court into a hotbed of intrigue and assassination attempts. The tension finally snapped on July 2, 626, in a bloody event known as the Xuanwu Gate incident. Li Shimin, believing his brothers were about to murder him, laid an ambush at the capital city's northern gate. As Li Jiancheng and a younger brother, Li Yuanji, approached, Shimin and his followers struck, killing both of them in a brutal confrontation. Covered in the blood of his own kin, Li Shimin then forced his father, Emperor Gaozu, to name him the new crown prince. 2 months later, the emperor abdicated. At just 28, the military prodigy who had won the empire for his father now claimed it for himself. He would rule as Emperor Taizong, and under his reign, the blood-soaked foundations of the Tang would give way to a true golden age. Inheriting the throne through fratricide could have defined Taizong as a tyrant. Instead, his reign is remembered as the prosperity of the Zhenguan era, a period of remarkable social stability and wise governance. Taizong proved to be as skilled an emperor as he was a general. He had inherited a fragile state scarred by decades of war, with a decimated economy and an inept bureaucracy. His task was to transform it all into a functioning, prosperous empire. One of his most profound reforms was in the government itself. Taizong was a staunch believer in meritocracy. He expanded the civil service examination system, ensuring that talented men, regardless of family background, could rise to power based on their intellect and ability. He famously appointed Wei Zheng, a former advisor to his slain brother, as his chancellor, valuing his sharp and honest criticism above past loyalties. This commitment to competence over nepotism reduced corruption and created a highly effective and pragmatic civil service. Taizong sought to secure the people's welfare, reducing taxes and forced labor, and instituting legal codes that would serve as a model for centuries. With the home front secure, Taizong turned his attention outward. His military prowess was undiminished. He launched a series of brilliant campaigns, decisively defeating the powerful Eastern Turkic Khaganate in 630, a victory that shattered the Tang's most formidable rival and secured its northern frontier. This victory was so total that the tribal leaders of the region bestowed upon him the title of Heavenly Khan, acknowledging him not just as the Emperor of China, but as the sovereign of the steppes. His armies also pushed west, conquering oasis states and establishing control over the vital trade routes of Central Asia. These conquests had a monumental economic impact. The Tang formally reopened the network of trade routes we now call the Silk Road. For the first time in centuries, the path to the west was secure, heralding the golden age of Silk Road commerce. The Tang capital, Chang'an, exploded into the most populous and cosmopolitan city on the planet. Its city proper was home to roughly 1 million people, with perhaps another million in the surrounding area. Its vast, planned grid of wide avenues and walled districts teemed with life. Sogdian merchants from Persia, Turkic horsemen, Buddhist monks from India, Nestorian Christians, Jews, and Arabs all lived and worked within the city, creating an unparalleled hub of cultural exchange. Foreigners weren't just tolerated, they were welcomed, bringing new skills, ideas, and fashions. The markets of Chang'an were a sensory overload. Caravans arrived laden with high-quality horses from the west, exotic spices like cloves and cinnamon, precious gems, and metals. In return, a river of Chinese goods flowed out. Silk, of course, was the premier commodity, so prized it was often used as a form of currency. But also exquisite porcelain, the techniques for which were being perfected, along with tea and the revolutionary invention of paper. This wasn't just trade, it was a grand fusion. The Chinese adopted foreign music, learned to make sugar from sugarcane and wine from grapes, and even began to use chairs and stools instead of sitting on floor mats. Under Emperor Taizong, China wasn't just a powerful empire, it was the confident, open, and undisputed center of the medieval world. As the Golden Age established by Taizong continued under his successor, Emperor Gaozong, a new power was rising within the innermost sanctums of the imperial palace. This was a force unlike any China had ever seen, a woman named Wu Zetian. Her story is one of breathtaking ambition, political genius, and utter ruthlessness. Wu Zetian entered the palace at just 14, as a minor concubine to the great Emperor Taizong himself. While intelligent, she never truly captured his favor. She did, however, capture the attention of the crown prince, Li Ji. When Taizong died, according to custom, his childless concubines were sent to a Buddhist monastery to live out their days. For Wu Zetian, this could have been the end. But Li Ji, now Emperor Gaozong, was captivated by her and brought her back to the palace. Back in the viper's nest of the court, Wu Zetian's ambition ignited. She methodically worked her way up, competing with the reigning Empress Huang and the emperor's favorite concubine. The stories of her rise are chilling. The most infamous alleges that she murdered her own infant daughter and skillfully blamed Empress Huang, a horrific act that led Gaozong to depose the empress and elevate Wu Zetian to the position in 655. As empress, her influence became absolute. Emperor Gaozong suffered from poor health, and a stroke severely affected his eyesight, leaving him increasingly dependent on his wife. Wu Zetian proved to be a masterful politician. She sat in on court audiences, read state documents, and made decisions on appointments and policy. Soon, she held power equal to the emperor, and the court referred to them as the two sages. For decades, she ruled from behind the throne. When Gaozong died in 683, she became Empress Dowager, the ultimate power behind her sons, who succeeded as emperors in name only. She wasn't content to be a puppet master. She exiled one son and forced the other to remain a virtual prisoner while she ruled openly. She established a network of secret police to eliminate any opposition, ruthlessly purging the court of old, powerful families and anyone loyal to the Li imperial clan. Finally, in the year 690, Wu Zetian did the unthinkable. She forced her son to abdicate, cast aside the Tang Dynasty, and proclaimed the founding of her own dynasty, the Zhou. She took the throne not as an empress consort, but as Emperor Zetian, the one and only woman to ever rule China in her own right. Her reign wasn't simply a story of terror. She was an effective and decisive ruler. She continued the meritocratic policies of Taizong, promoting talented officials from lower ranks who were loyal to her. She took great interest in agriculture and implemented policies to support the peasantry, such as tax reductions. She was a devout Buddhist and generously patronized the religion, using it to legitimize her unprecedented rule. During her 15-year reign as emperor, and her decades of de facto rule before it, the empire largely remained powerful and prosperous. She shattered every convention of a patriarchal society, proving a woman could not only rule, but rule effectively. But her dynasty was a dynasty of one. As she aged into her 80s, court officials grew anxious. In 705, in a palace coup, they forced her to abdicate in favor of her exiled son, restoring the Tang Dynasty. She died later that year, leaving behind a legacy so complex, so filled with both brilliance and brutality, that China has debated her character ever since. With the Tang Dynasty restored, the empire entered what many consider its absolute zenith under the long reign of Emperor Xuanzong, who came to the throne in 712. The grandson of Empress Wu, Xuanzong inherited a stable and prosperous realm. The early part of his reign, known as the Yuan era, was a period of incredible cultural and economic flourishing. Xuanzong was a capable administrator and a great patron of the arts. He established a poetry academy, and under his watch, Chinese literature reached an apex of creativity. This was the age of China's greatest poets. Over 48,000 poems from this era have been preserved, a testament to how central poetry was to Tang culture. The two brightest stars were Li Bai and Du Fu. Li Bai was a romantic, a wanderer whose verses are filled with powerful imagery of nature, freedom, and wine. Du Fu, by contrast, was a realist, a Confucian moralist whose poems provide a stark, moving commentary on the social injustices and suffering he witnessed. Their work, along with countless other artists, captured the elegance and dynamism of the age. Art flourished, with landscape painting becoming a major genre and tricolor glazed pottery figures becoming iconic symbols of the era. For decades, the empire seemed invincible. But as Xuanzong's reign wore on, a subtle decay set in. The emperor, once diligent, became increasingly withdrawn from government affairs. In his later years, he fell deeply and obsessively in love with a concubine named Guifei. Originally the wife of one of his sons, the emperor arranged for her to become a Taoist nun to obscure the scandal before making her his own imperial consort. Xuanzong was utterly besotted. He neglected his duties, lavishing attention and wealth upon her and her family. He appointed her corrupt and incompetent cousin, young Guizhong, as chancellor, who used his immense power to enrich himself and settle scores. Nepotism and factionalism. The very things Taizong had worked so hard to stamp out, began to rot the government from within. At the same time, a critical shift was occurring in the military. The old citizen militia was replaced by professional armies stationed on the frontiers, commanded by powerful military governors known as judushi. While this professionalized the military, it also gave these governors immense regional power, effectively making them semi-independent warlords. One of these governors was An Lushan. Of non-Han Chinese descent, he was a charismatic and ambitious general who controlled 3 powerful frontier garrisons in the northeast. He skillfully ingratiated himself with the court, becoming a favorite of both the emperor and, allegedly, young Guifei, who even playfully adopted the portly general as her son. As Chancellor Yang Guizhong grew increasingly suspicious of An Lushan's power, the rivalry between the two men intensified, pushing the empire toward a precipice. The dazzling height of the Tang's cultural achievement was now shadowed by deep political corruption. The Golden Age was about to be shattered. The breaking point came on December 16, 755. An Lushan, using his conflict with Chancellor Yang Guizhong as a pretext, marched his massive, battle-hardened army toward the capital. The An Lushan Rebellion had begun, and it would become one of the most devastating conflicts in Chinese history. The imperial forces were unprepared. An Lushan's army swept south, easily capturing the secondary capital of Luoyang. The main Tang army held a strong defensive position at the strategic Tong Pass, the last barrier protecting Chang'an. However, the corrupt Chancellor Yang Guizhong, fearing the defending general might usurp power, forced him to engage An Lushan's army on open ground. The result was a catastrophic defeat. The pass was lost, and the road to Chang'an was wide open. With the rebels approaching, Emperor Xuanzong and his court fled in panic. On the road, his terrified and mutinous imperial guards laid the blame for the disaster squarely on the Yang family. They executed the hated Chancellor Yang Guizhong and then surrounded the emperor's tent, demanding the death of Yang Guifei. The emperor, heartbroken but powerless, capitulated. He ordered his beloved concubine to be strangled. The great love story that defined the latter half of his reign ended in tragedy on a desolate roadside. The rebellion raged for nearly 8 years. It was a period of unimaginable devastation. Control of the empire was fragmented. The capital, Chang'an, and Luoyang were both sacked. The conflict may have resulted in millions of deaths, not just from fighting, but from the widespread famine and displacement that followed. Though An Lushan himself was assassinated by his own son in 757, the rebellion continued under other leaders. The Tang court, so weakened it had to seek aid from foreign powers, finally crushed the rebels in 763. Though the Tang Dynasty survived, it was a shadow of its former self. The Golden Age was over. The central government's authority was shattered. The judushi, who had helped put down the rebellion, now wielded even greater autonomous power, often ignoring the emperor, collecting their own taxes, and passing their positions to their sons. The empire had effectively disintegrated into a collection of semi-independent states. The long, slow decline lasted for another 150 years. The court was paralyzed by the growing power of eunuchs, who controlled the palace and manipulated emperors. The government, desperate for funds, levied crushing taxes on the peasantry. In the 870s, this suffering erupted into the massive Huang Chao Rebellion, a peasant uprising that ravaged the countryside for a decade and sacked Chang'an once again. This was a death blow from which the dynasty could never recover. Warlords now controlled everything. In 904, one of these warlords, Zhenguan, seized the capital, assassinated the emperor, and placed a child puppet on the throne. In 907, he forced the last Tang emperor to abdicate. The glorious Tang dynasty was officially over. The fall of the Tang in 907 ushered in another period of chaos, as China once again splintered into warring states. But the end of the dynasty was not the end of its story. The legacy of the Tang is etched into the very fabric of Chinese civilization. Politically, the administrative structures and the merit-based civil service exam system refined by the Tang would become the standard for all subsequent dynasties. Economically, their promotion of trade and the infrastructure they built, like the Grand Canal, created a national market that laid the foundation for future prosperity. But it's the cultural legacy that shines brightest. The Tang is remembered as China's ultimate golden age of cosmopolitanism. The sheer quality of its poetry set a benchmark for all of Chinese literature, with the works of Li Bai and Du Fu remaining central to Chinese identity. Tang innovations like woodblock printing revolutionized the spread of knowledge. And though it wasn't yet used for warfare, this era also saw Daoist alchemists first formulate gunpowder, a discovery that would, quite literally, change the world. The dynasty's influence radiated across Asia. Japan and Korea eagerly adopted Tang architectural styles, religious beliefs, and literary forms. The openness of the era, the enthusiastic welcome of foreign peoples and ideas, created a vibrant, multicultural society that remains a high point in Chinese history. So profound was the Tang's impact that even today, many Chinese people, especially in the South and in overseas communities, refer to themselves as Tang people, Tangren. It's a name that speaks to a deep pride in this period of unparalleled strength, confidence, and cultural brilliance. The dynasty may have collapsed into ruin, but the golden age of the Tang forever defined the peak of Chinese civilization. What part of the Tang dynasty's story do you find most fascinating? Was it the epic scale of the Silk Road, the ruthless ambition of Empress Wu, or the tragic tale of Emperor Xuanzong? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.